everyone. We are on High Holiday Argumentative Davening number 2. The next fight of the High Holidays was not in davening, but in benching. And that is the last line of Yaale Veyavo when you bench on Yontiv on Rosh Hashanah. Kel melech chanun v'rachum ata. The word melech, you are a merciful God, is a point of controversy all year and on Rosh Hashanah, as I will explain. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, Daf Mem Tet Amud Aleph, says that in the fourth bracha of the benching, you better mention the kingship of God. In the third bracha of benching, we mentioned the kingship of David. Gemara explains why. Because Lav Orechara the Lo Amar B'Malchut Shamayim. You mentioned the kingship of David, you should mention the kingship of the entire world, and that is God. So everyone agrees that you're not allowed to say the word Melech in the bracha of Bona Yerushalayim, because people will think that God is part of the king club with human beings. That's what the Torah says explicitly. You're allowed to say the question is Yaale Veyavo a separate paragraph or part of that bracha? If it's part of that bracha, then we have a problem with the word melech. And if it's not part of that bracha, namely it's there, but it's a separate paragraph, we wouldn't have a problem. So comes along the Rama. It says the following words: V'yeshomrim, the af kishomer Yaale Veyavo, lo yisariyeh melech chanun v'rachum, ela yedaleg milat melech v'sfara nechonahi. The Rama says it's better when you bench to say God is indeed Kel, Aleph, Lamed. That's only God. But don't say the word melech. Only say he is a God, not a melech. Why? Explains the Abud Raham. Because you just mentioned that there was another melech, namely David. And indeed, says the Abud Raham, that it would be derech eretz, since you're mentioning the kingship of David, to also mention God. People will think, hey, there's, different kings. There's the king of China, and there's the king of Asia, and there's the king of England. And there's also the king that we call God. That's not an equation. God is the God, the king of the entire world. You don't go ahead and say, there's a king like this, and then there's God. They're all kings. They're in the king club. So therefore, it's not right. So therefore, in the bracha in which you mention the kingship of David, you don't mention the kingship of God. You don't mention that God is also a king. You mention God as a God, but not as a king. Therefore, says the Abud Raham, that's the reason for this Ramah. And indeed, the Magen Giborim comes along and says, the Magen Giborim comes along and says that indeed, according to this, that it indeed would make everyone part of the king club. He agrees with the Abud Raham and says not to say it. And the Ramah loves this svara. However, the Ramah is honest and says, actually, I never saw anyone do this. So even though he thinks it's right, and even though he thinks it's the proper thing to do, he never saw it. Explains the Magen Avraham, because in Yaale Veyavo, it's a milta to b'fnei atzmohi. The Lavush never even brought it, and the reason for it is because Yaale Veyavo is considered something separate. What does it mean, separate? Meaning it's not part of the regular bracha we say every day. It's only an addition we say on Shabbos, on Yontiv, or on Rosh Chodesh, and therefore, since it's separate, we don't have the sensitivity. It's a separate paragraph. How do I know it's a separate paragraph? Simply because if you forget it, there's rules and regulations. What do? Do you have to go back? Don't you have to go back? Everyone would agree. If you forget one of the 3 blessings, the oraita of benching, you have to go back. But if you forgot Yaale Veyavo, there's rules and regulations. Depends which day it is, and it depends when it is. And therefore, it's a milta b'fnei atzmohi. So that sensitivity doesn't exist by Yaale Veyavo, simply because it's its own paragraph. It's not connected to the paragraph of Malchut Beit David. Obviously, the Abud Ram would assume, due respect, it's within the same bracha. Rachem ends with Bona Yerushalayim. Within that bracha we say Yaale Veyavo. So it may be a separate paragraph, but within the same bracha, the sensitivity does exist. Comes along the Eliyahu Rabbah and actually explains a second explanation as to why there's no sensitivity, and that is because Since Yaale Veyavo is something we say in davening as well as in benching, they didn't want to make people nuts. In davening they would say melech because there's no sensitivity there. We don't say Malchut Beit David in davening, but in benching they wouldn't. They would get mixed up, and that would not be a good idea. And therefore, says the Eliyahu Rabbah, they didn't want to change it in benching. They wanted to make it the same in benching as well as in davening, so people would say it properly, and we'll be somech on the Magen Avram that said it's its own paragraph, so this sensitivity of making everyone part of the King Club doesn't exist. At the end of the day, the Magen Giborim says, "Minhag shel Yisrael Torahi, the Yesh Lomar Melech Yaale Veyavo, K'mo shekatav Magen Avraham, and the Eliyahu Rabbah, ve'ein l'shanot haminhag." Why is Rosh Hashanah an argument? Therefore, because the Mata Ephraim Margaliyot says that even those that don't say it all year should say it on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Shekol Ikari Atfilut V'Abrochot Shebayom Hazeh Miyusadim Al Kvod Adar Malchuto. Says the Elef Lamate Ephraim Magaliot that the whole theme of Rosh Hashanah is Malchut. The whole theme of Rosh Hashanah is that God is the King of the world. We end the bracha in the middle of the Amidah with Melech al Kol Haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. The King over the whole world sanctifies Israel and Rosh Hashanah. That's the way we say it in the Kiddush. So of course you're going to say it in the benching. It's the theme of the day. And indeed, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, the former chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, said indeed that I don't see any reason to skip it on Rosh Hashanah, and he ultimately says for two reasons. Number one, many Rishonim say that the reason that we don't say the Malchut of Hashem in Bonei Yerushalayim is not because we don't want to put God into the King Club with human beings, but rather for technical reasons that have to do with it starting with Baruch, not ending with Baruch, nothing to do with being or not being in the King Club. In other words, this whole sensitivity doesn't exist. Number two, the Rama himself said that even though this is his preference, this is not the minhag, and the Magen Avraham codifies it as well as the Taz. And therefore he ends by saying, Kimat kol gogdolei haposkim asher beit Yisrael nishan aleim echitu gam b'chol shana chol hashana laskir melech b'Yaale Veyavo v'chatvu she'ein l'shamot. Most poskim say you should say it all year, but on Rosh Hashanah itself, all the more so because this is the day of Malchut, as the Gemara says. Say Malchuyot so that you can make me the king. So from this perspective, indeed, all year long we maybe have a sensitivity, maybe we don't, but on Rosh Hashanah it's the theme of the day, you should say it. Rav Soloveitchik indeed did that. All year long he did not say it, but as Rav Shechter writes in Nefesh Harav, that he followed the Mata Ephraim, and only on Rosh Hashanah in the benching did he say Melech, but all year long he didn't. So to sum up, some people do not say the word Melech in the Yaale Veyavo all year in the benching, because it would seem like you're putting God in the King's Club with David the King, with Melech David. On Rosh, some disagree and say, nah, it's its own paragraph, we don't have that sensitivity. On Rosh Hashanah itself, the Mata Ephraim said to say it, because that's the theme of the day. And indeed, even those that skipped it went ahead and said it.